Tanse, hello, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, however you're listening to this podcast. Thank you for supporting the work that we do. The UDR Cast is a full-time job, takes a lot of work. I have a lot of people helping me, supporting me behind the scenes, and basically really trying to support the people who listen to it. I do the UDR Cast out of the passion of my heart, and sometimes, it gets hard to make it happen. But we as a team try to join forces and get the content out. So I'm just asking you from my heart, if you have an opportunity to maybe help support the podcast through donations, a cup of coffee a month, a cup of coffees a month. Check out my Patreon account. We're accepting subscribers and donations there. Also, if you want to click onto my website, BILLWARDLIFE, there's a button there, it takes you to the Patreon. And, if we're helping you or your family or understanding, just think about giving us a hand up so we can keep creating great content. And if you have any suggestions on what you might want us to talk about, leave it in the comments on the website. Thank you. Hi. Welcome to the UDR Cast. UDR stands for Uncover, Discover, Recover. Coming to you live from the recovery capital of Canada. I am Bill Ward, your host. We're going to stick with a series that we've been doing, parenting in recovery, parenting family in recovery. That's kind of what it's morphed into. And, whenever I do things, I never know really. I have an idea of what they're going to be, but oftentimes Creator makes the changes that he makes, and that's where we're at. Today I got a real awesome guest for us, for you all. Known Chris now I'll introduce you. Chris Latin, good to have you here. Chris L. We're not affiliated with 12-Step. I hope you don't mind that I'm using Chris Latin.
Definitely not.
Okay. Good to have you here, bro.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Bill. It's an honor and a privilege to be here today.
Good.
Yeah.
Were you nervous at all?
Actually, you know what? I totally was. I live in a world of fear at times. And when Tamara reached out to me to be a part of this podcast, it wasn't so much the speaking factor, as that's something I've come accustomed to with a passion for service in H&I and doing a lot of speaking. But it was the relation to speaking about parenting and recovery, right? Because when I received that message, I was in a place where I'd just come out of a long-term relationship and coming back from visiting my kids who now live 16,000 kilometers away from me. And I wasn't in a good headspace. I was in a space where, what do I have to offer? What can I bring to the table? And, the fear gripped me for a little bit, but my sponsor was quick to readjust me and just tell me, it's evident that you have something to offer because they reached out and invited you to speak here today. So he puts it in perspective for me at the best of times.
Beautiful. Yeah. Can you just raise that mic up just a little bit? Yeah. Yeah, and that's a reason. Like when we were kind of looking at who we wanted to ask, there's a lot of people we could ask, right? And you were picked for a reason. And so I think that's just important, and I'm glad your sponsor brought that to the attention of you because you were picked for a reason. I have a lot of respect for you. We've had chats over the years. We don't know each other super well, but I think there's a mutual respect, and I think there's a mutual respect for me to you in how you've handled yourself and your business with your kids, your ex-wife, and in another relationship that we've talked about here and there lightly, and so yeah. So you just came back from visiting your kids, eh?
Yes, I did. They now live in Brisbane, Australia. They have since about January 23rd of last year. So just over a year now, they've been in Brisbane.
And not too long ago, you had to make a pretty big decision about, I guess, letting them go to live there. Can you tell us what that decision was like? Kind of how did it come up?
Yeah, I can definitely kind of explain the intricacies of what happened. So Coming into recovery, I'll just touch base on like myself and my ex-wife, because I think that's a big part of it, right? As for the harms that I've done to that lady, we had separated in 2019, and I didn't find like solid recovery until 2021, right? So she had seen me at my worst, and then I continued to get even worse once we had separated, right? And I had a lot of blame pointed towards her, pointed towards her new partner that she's now married to. And, there was a lot of destruction that I caused and a lot of harm, that tornado roaring its way through the lives of others. And in my experience, I roar the tornado's the worst towards the ones that I love most, right? And I never thought, with all that damage that I had done, that she'd come to a place where she is today at all, let alone how quickly it happened. Right. So she's been very transparent with me since being in recovery. She's been very honest and supportive and loving in all the ways that she can. Right. So she approached me about a year and a half before they were, thinking of moving to Brisbane, because that's where her new husband is from originally. And, she just wanted to have a conversation with me one day. So she asked me to meet at the Tim Hortons, and I was like, sure, I'll show up for you. Right. I had no idea what her intentions were to ask me that day, but we sat down and we did the pleasantries, and then she's like, okay, I'm just going to get right into it. Right. And she's like, myself and Dave, that's her new husband now, partner at the time. And he has 3 daughters. Myself and my ex-wife, we have a daughter and 2 boys, right? And unfortunately, his ex-wife passed away, and he wanted to entertain the idea of maybe bringing the whole family back to his home country, Australia, and more specifically Brisbane. So she just wanted to ask me if there was any, potential of me, giving consent to allow my kids to move to Brisbane with them. And I'm going to tell you, one of the biggest reasons that I fell back on each time that I was debating and having conversation about which way to go with this decision was in that moment, in that Tim Hortons, sitting across from my ex-wife, when she asked me that question, my gut didn't go to like what it normally would and like think about all the selfish reasons I want my kids to be there. I didn't have that feeling of like, you bitch, how could you ask me that question? You want to take my kids 16,000 kilometers away from me? Like, don't you know how that's going to affect me? That wasn't the feeling I got. And that is so strange for me to like think about how my body reacted in that moment, because it is not how I expected it to go. Mm-hmm. Right? So upon reflection, like it took me a year and a couple of months to actually come to the conclusion that allowing them to move was for their best interest, right? I had to let go of self, right? And just consider what was best for my three babies, right? And I trust my ex-wife. I trust her new partner, Dave. I know that they love and cherish my children. All 6 children together. They're crazy. I don't know how they do that. But anyway, that's beyond what we're talking about today. But, I did a lot of reflection and just ask God, like, what is best in this situation? And like, yeah, I wanted my kids to be with me, right? I could have been selfish and said, no, you can't take my children, right? But in the 5 years between us separating and me coming into recovery, this man, Dave, and my ex-wife showed up for my kids in ways that I was unable to before, right? I had a lot of blame, like I said, but my perspective up and until doing a step 5 was absolutely skewed, right? And, since I've come to realize that Dave is an amazing man, he's got a big heart and he cares for my children, I'd say just as much as I do. Right. And he showed up when I couldn't. Right. I owe that man a great debt. Today we're good friends. Right. And it took a lot of trust and faith and like a lot of talking with other people and like just getting it out there. Mm-hmm. And no one could give me the definite answer of like, Chris, this is what you need to do. This is what you should do. No one really had experience of what I was experiencing. It came down to, most people ask, like, what is best for the kids, right? And when it came down to it, I was still rebuilding my life. I had committed to full-time schooling, becoming a LPN within the healthcare system, which I'm still committed to this day. I'm in the 4th semester of 5. And, I just had to let go. I had to take that self-sacrifice and just let them go and trust that for now, this is God's plan, right?
And then when you were out there visiting recently, you saw that and you felt it. And whatever the maybe negative talk of, what did I do? Why did I make this decision? And now it was validated that you made the right decision, even though it might have been hard. Is that correct?
I believe that is correct. Like over the last year, the 11 months from January 23rd of last year till December 22nd when I went to go visit them, there were days where I could trust fully in God and like totally be okay with the decision that I made. But like the addict mind, at least in my head, comes out of nowhere sometimes. And then I'm thinking like, I'm the worst father ever. How could I ever make this decision? We're never going to be the same. I'm going to lose my children. And that's simply not the case. That is simply not the case. Because when I arrived in the airport in Brisbane on December 23rd, my kids were so elated to see me. I could see the love in their eyes. They came running towards me. There was like tears and everything. Like it was just a magical time, right? And I understood that they were in a safe place, but it was just that much more comforting to like experience their world firsthand, right? And see all the people and all the pieces that, that they're living in today, right? It was a blessing.
And where'd you stay?
So this is wild, just wild. Like, this is how I know God's working in my life, like full effect, God's working in my life today. My ex-wife and her husband, they just recently got married in November, right? They've been together for 5 years and like all the power to them. That's all I want is for them both to be happy, right? That's all I want. They offered for me to come and stay at their home, like with them. So like 8 people plus me over the Christmas holidays in Brisbane for 17 days. And I don't know many people that got that kind of relationship with their ex-wife when they've done as much damage as I had done, right? So like that's evidence that God can perform miracles and will perform miracles if I do the next right thing, right?
Yeah, dude, that's beautiful stuff. So, kind of starting where we're starting and seeing some of the gifts of what your hard work and recovery has done and, what your relationship with the Creator, with God has brought you and some of the miracles that kind of have come. Let's take it back to like the beginning, tell us a little bit about how you grew up and siblings and your parents and all that stuff.
Okay. Yeah, I can take it back a little bit. So I was born and raised in Calgary, born in 1978. I've never lived anywhere else other than Calgary. Born at the Rocky View General Hospital, which is kind of interesting. That's where I'm doing my clinical in a couple of months here, is back at Rocky View, Unit 73. But I don't like using the word normal for a family because, that could mean anything, right? But I don't really have any like traumatic experiences family-wise that, can like contribute to maybe a reason that I ended up drinking the way I did and stuff like that. I'm the oldest of 3 boys. So I have 2 younger brothers, Mark and Jesse. And, we had a pretty decent upbringing, right? We didn't go without, right? We had food on the table 3 times a day. We had clothes on our back. We did extracurricular activities. We had friends. We went camping quite a bit as a family and stuff like that. But we didn't have maybe the excesses that I saw some of my other friends at school that they had, right? And, there's some of the things, like what I remember, I have a vivid memory of being in elementary, and I don't know if this maybe dates me, but wearing Levi's jeans back in the day with the red tabs. Well, my family couldn't afford red tabs, and we had the orange tab. And man, did I get called out on a daily basis for not being able to afford a red tab fucking jean. right? And I don't know why that sticks out so vividly, but it just made me feel like I was less than and I couldn't fit in, right? Because I went to school with kids that, their families were a little bit more well off than mine, right? And at the time, that really hit home, and I just didn't really fit in the school atmosphere that I was placed in, right? And so I gravitated to some friends in and around the community within Acadia. That's where I grew up, and I turned to skateboarding at a young age, right? Because these people accepted me, right? I could dress different, I could be different, I could be who I wanted to be, hanging around with these guys. Right. And then I guess it was probably the age of 14. I'm starting to feel the peer pressure of like friends wanting me to drink, wanting me to try marijuana and stuff like that. And, I grew up in a home where my parents were like, you don't drink until you're 18 and you definitely don't smoke marijuana. Right. Drugs are bad. Wait to drink when you're 18. Right. And like I listened to that. Right. I really did. Right. I took that as, I'm going to carry with that message, and I'm going to say no to the peer pressure. But it was about 2 years of continuous peer pressure, as friends do, and I finally buckled, right? So during the summer in between grade 10 and 11, was the first time that I had drank. And looking back, I drank to oblivion from the first get-go, right? And the progression of my drinking and using, escalated very quickly. In the first 3 months, it went from just like weekends, looking forward to spending my allowance money on the weekend to get a couple of 40s on a Saturday night, to, 3 months later, using a substance of some kind each and every day, right? So I can see the progression in my life, immediately. I can also see the progression of consequences, because in the same 3 months, I had gone to the hospital twice to have my stomach pumped for excessive drinking. And, each time I came out of the hospital, it was like, oh, I just fucked up that time. I just went too hard that time. Every kid at 16 does this, don't they? Right? It's just it's a testament of what we're doing at the time. Right? And interesting enough, there's one nurse, and I believe it was the second time I was in there. Right. And I don't know if she had seen me the first time. I'm not even sure what hospitals I was at either of those times. But she had dead-eyed me while I was on the bed and like aggressively ripped out the catheter that I had in from the night before. And she was just very unhappy with me. So I don't know what I did to piss her off or whatever. But on the way out, she handed me some pamphlets. And I was like, okay, I'll take these pamphlets. I know nothing of what you're trying to give me. But, I'm previewing them as I'm walking out of the hospital, and it says AA on it. And I have no idea what AA is. I don't think I have a problem. I don't know what alcoholism is. None of that stuff, right? So I'm like, thank you for your information, and I dump it in the can. On my way out of the hospital and back to the liquor store I go.
And you're 16.
16 years old, right? And that was probably the first message God was trying to tell me, like, you might have a problem here, bro. Right? But at that point, I had no inkling, no desire to even think about putting down the drink or the drug, because it was doing so much for me at that time, or so I thought.
A couple things like the orange tab and the red tab jeans. I totally remember that, bro. And I remember how much judgment there was as kids if you wore the orange tabs or the red tabs. And then also there was like Sergio Volante jeans, and there was these other designer jeans, and there was so much like social discord or community depending on what you wore. And back then as kids, you just want to be accepted. And I so remember those, bro. And I also had an identity crisis and didn't really know. And I went to Bishop Grandin High School, and I'm from Ogden. So I didn't fit in. And I also gravitated to skateboarding and fucking just basically the same things that you talked about for the same reasons. And my dad also was called by my mom when I was 17. And my mom said to my dad, like, you got to come and help your son. Like, he's dying. He's going to die. And I'm really worried about him, because I was doing the same things you were. I didn't make it to the hospital, but I was fucking drinking like a fish and passing out and doing crime. And my dad was in recovery, and he was director of a treatment center. And he came down and he's like, son, your mom says you have a problem and that you're not really drinking or partying normal. And I'm like, I party and drink just like all my friends, and this is the way that we do it at 17, and don't worry about me, I'm good. And he was begging me to go to treatment because they could see that I had a problem. But like you, I'm like, fuck, I don't got a problem. You guys have the problem, thinking that I have a problem. And if we keep having these conversations, there's going to be a real fucking problem, right? But anyway, so just a lot of similarities, right, that I didn't know Anyway, keep going, bro.
First note, I went to Grandin as well.
No, I was going to ask you while you were saying it, bro. I was going to ask you.
Graded out in 96, right? And
it's very, very cliquey school, eh?
It totally was, right? But okay, so like through elementary, didn't feel like I fit in. I gravitated towards the skateboarders, so I didn't have a lot of friends at school. I had acquaintances, yes, because I could just, I'm easy to talk to, and I, will give anyone the time of day if they care to have it. And then I went into junior high, and because I had started dressing like full on like a skater at the time with the big baggy jeans in the late 80s, early 90s, and the big baggy t-shirts and stuff like that, like I got criticized even further because I was the only skateboarder in that junior high at the time, St. Bonaventure, right? But transitioning from St. Bonaventure, the junior high that I went to Bishop Grandin, then I started to see more skaters, right? So I kind of had my own little clique, right? And it was during my time at Bishop Grandin that I met another guy who wanted to make a name for himself in the high school dealing drugs, right? And we became good friends, and so we started to do that. And when I look back, the feelings that I got when people would want me around because of the product that I had it was like that outside validation that I needed. Right? It made me feel like I fit in. It made me feel cool. It made me feel powerful. It made me feel like I belonged, right? But it was all false, right? It was definitely all false, right? And, it just, the progression, just steadily got worse and worse and worse. When I was at high school and, attempting to be somewhat of a drug dealer, I guess. Different substances came into my life, and I would go crazy excessive on each one of them for a period of time, and then just on to the next, right? And I guess in my mind, looking back now, I would tell myself like, okay, like I did that for 6 months and I stopped, so like of course I've got control, right? But what I wasn't looking at is that I always had a crutch to lean on, right? I always had something to rely on, modifying my emotions, covering up that fear and allowing me a sense of like validity in the world, right? And, so thank goodness I like just barely graduated high school, and I had no, I guess, drive or ambition to further my education at that time. So I ended up being placed, well, long story short, I wanted to be a cook when I came out of high school. I was doing some work experience through Earls, and alcohol got me fired from that job. And so I was living with my parents. My mom had waited until I was 18 to tell my dad that she was going to divorce, right? So at that point, she left and took my two younger brothers with her because they weren't quite 18 yet. And eventually they started doing week on, week off. But she posed me the question of like, who do you want to go with? Do you want to come with me, or do you want to stay with your dad? And I gave her the excuse, like, someone's got to stay with dad. Like, what's going to happen, right? But when I look back now, it was a selfish motive for me to stay, because I understood that he'd be dealing with a lot of his own shit, and I'd be able to get away with whatever I want in the basement, drinking, drugging, having people over, partying, just living the way I wanted to live, right, without any consequences. And then so when I got fired from that thing at Earl's, my dad said to me, like, if you're living under my roof, you're going to be working, right? And he had, in the next week, lined me up with an interview at a cabinet door making place. And this might date me as well, but I went in and I got hired that day for $6.50 an hour. Right. So minimum wage was quite lower back then. And anyway, like this job, I excelled at it. I enjoyed it. I don't say I have a passion for it, but it gave me exactly what I needed to do what I wanted to do in my world. Right. And I don't know if my dad ever actually like said these words to me, but the way that he lived his life was like, if you work hard, you can party hard. Right. So giving me that excuse or that, the thinking that it's okay. Like if I put in my 8-10 hours a day for 5 days a week, no excuses, you show up no matter what, then you can do whatever the heck you want to do on your own time. Mm-hmm. Right. And I really took that to heart. Right. And I carried on with that company for like 13 years. And again, just progressively getting worse and worse and worse. At the age of 24, that's about the time that I remember waking up first thing in the morning and I had to have a substance immediately. Like that was the first all-consuming thought that I had to fulfill before I could carry on with my day. Right. And interestingly enough, that's the same year that I met the lady that I ended up marrying and having 3 children with. And like we had a pretty amazing relationship for a long time, right? Mm-hmm. I was unable to, I don't know, like when I look back now, like I was unable to emotionally show up for her in the ways that I now understand are critical for a relationship to thrive and carry on. But we did a lot of fun things. We went on adventures together and we just lived life spontaneously, right? And it wasn't until I was 34 or 33 that we eventually got married, so 2009. And we went down to Mexico and we had a bunch of friends from Canada down there. And, the party carried on there, right? And like she had one request for me on her wedding day was not to get fucked up before the wedding. And I made that promise. I told her, like, yeah, that's one thing I can do. Like, who can't stay sober for 4 hours after they wake up until they do their vows, right? And I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. I found myself doing lines and drinking beers before going down to the beach and saying my vows to this woman, right? And when I look back now, it's like, what the hell, man? How did I not see this as a problem? But I mean, I was just really sick.
Was she disappointed?
I don't think she knew at that time that I had used before the wedding. But I mean, I carried on after the actual ceremony into the afternoon and the evening that I couldn't even consummate the marriage at the end of the night, right? It's just my typical way of drinking is drinking to oblivion and blacking out and passing out. Like that's how it always was. Right. And I just couldn't be honest enough with myself about it to see it until I had felt enough pain. Right. Mm.
And did she ever come to you and say, like, this is a problem, man? Like, or what was she like with it?
It came to light, like, so after we got married in 2009, in 2012, she got pregnant with her first child, right? Our beautiful daughter, Presley. And she was able to stop drinking and smoking weed, like no problem for that 9 months. It was like not even a question. She had no issue, no problem, no struggle. It was just like, I'm pregnant, that's it. I'm going to put down the drink and the drug and, we're going to have this healthy baby, right? And it was at that point that she kind of started to speak up, whether she had noticed it before or not, as me, the way I drank and used was an issue. Right. So there was multiple occasions in that 9 months where she approached me and said, like, Chris, I think you've got a problem here. Like, is there any way that you can try to control, reduce, manage the way that you drink? Like, you can't be coming home from work drunk every day and continue to drink throughout the night. Like, this is just not going to work moving forward. Right. And I would pull myself together and I'd be like, I have full control over this, Kathleen. Watch. I have full control. And I would like white knuckle 2 or 3 days. Right. And I would be like, there, right? Got control. Right. And I would go right back to it. Right. And, it was like that vicious cycle for that 9 months. Right. And, when I found out that we were having a daughter, I remember thinking to myself, this is the thing I need. This is going to get me to be able to control and manage my drinking. right? I'm going to be able to like focus my attention on this beautiful little girl, become the father that she wants or needs me to be, and drugs and alcohol will just like casually take a back seat, right? I didn't know how powerless I was at that time and how sick I truly was, and the fact that I was going to be unable to do that, right? So when we were at the hospital, it was quite the long labor. We had been there for about 10 hours. She was not getting much closer with the contractions and stuff, but, it was a long process. And she finally gave in to taking the epidural, right? So the doctor came in and prepped her for that, and the anesthesiologist followed in and like did the procedure, gave her this epidural. And then the nurses were like, okay, like this is going to take a few minutes or whatever to take effect. Labor's not going to be like induced like right away. So they're like, Chris, this is a great time for you to go to the cafeteria and have a bite to eat. Right. And so what does Chris do, Bill? Chris leaves the hospital, gets in his car, and he goes to the drug dealer, and he goes to the liquor store, and he returns to the parkade and commences to get high and drink, with no thought of like, I might be missing my daughter's birth, no thought of my wife in the maternity ward, in labor pains, maybe needing her husband for support, right? And I walk back into the Rocky View Hospital, and they're paging my fucking name. And I'm like, I lose my stuff because I'm like, I'm missing the birth of my first child, right? So I race up there, and I get beside her, and I think because of the epidural, she didn't really notice that I was gone that long. We've never actually had a conversation about how she felt about that, but she just accepted that I was back in the room, held my hand, and I watched the birth of my first child. And it was truly magical and beautiful, right? And at the end of that, I promised myself if I'm lucky enough to have any other children, there's no way I'm ever doing that again. Do you think I kept that promise to myself, Bill?
Absolutely not.
Of course I didn't. I just brought my drugs and alcohol into the hospital those next 2 times, right? That is how sick I am. That's the insanity that I'm dealing with, right?
Yeah, and I'm not laughing at you. You know that. It's the calamity that turns into comedy, and just like the typicalness of us trying to control and enjoy and manage living in delusion and doing all these things and just trying to navigate life in such a chaotic way. Like, and over the years, like I go to meetings or I'm in different situations and people will share something, dude, and I fucking laugh out loud. And I'm kind of embarrassed, but I'm never laughing at the person. I'm laughing at the illness, right? And that's what I laugh at. And you're a good storyteller too.
Well, it is comical. If I couldn't get to a point where if I can't laugh at what I used to do, like why am I here? Right? I don't know if my ex-wife would find it as comical as I do, but
Agreed.
And maybe we'll be able to talk about that one day, right? It would be nice to ask her how she felt when I came back into the room late, or if she can even recall that I did, right? That'd be an interesting topic of conversation one day, right? So carried on. I had 2 more beautiful children. The second one was a C-section. His name is Nixon. He's such a beautiful little boy. And then in 2018, I got a call from my wife while I was at work, and she's like, I'm pregnant again. And we're like, what? We weren't trying to have a 3rd child, but, he's such a little blessing in our lives today. His name is Asher, and he has no fear. This kid looks identical to me. There's no question that this is my child, because he looks, if you put a picture of him and myself next to each other at that age, bang on, right? And he's the coolest little guy. I wouldn't trade him for anything. Children are a challenge, but they're definitely worth all the work that you got to put in. And you know what? Like over the years, like I was physically there for them most of the time. Like as a father, I was physically present, right? Because I was done. I wasn't doing, going out to the bar anymore. Like my drinking was at home. I wanted to be alone. I wanted to drink and use how I wanted to drink. I would escape to the garage. I would escape to the bathroom. Like there was no going out, none of that shit. Like I didn't have friends anymore. Like I cut them out of my life because I thought they were the problem, right? Because I guess I should allude to, like, after we had our first daughter, or first child, Presley, about a year and a half later, I crashed my car with her in it at a year and a half, right? I'd been drinking all day at work, and it was my turn to pick her up from daycare. And she was at daycare in Mindapore. And if you know the city at all, we lived up in Shaughnessy. So it's like a 3-minute drive, right? And I'm still amazed to this day that the daycare operator like didn't understand how fucking loaded I was, because I arrived this close to a blackout, right? And I could minimalize the story and say that I only high centered the car, right? And like by God's grace, no one got hurt, right? But I got to think about all the things that could have happened, right? I could have hurt anyone on the road from my work to picking her up. I could have hurt her on the way from daycare to my home, right? And thankfully, I had enough coherency after we high-centered the car, crashed the vehicle, to get her out, because it was the dead of winter. She wasn't dressed for walking another 3 blocks or being carried by a drunk father on the ice to get home,
Jesus.
right? And by the grace of God, we made it in the door, right? And I mean, just made it in the door. I don't remember getting in the door. I remember Kathleen and her friend coming home about an hour and a half later, I was told, and banging the front door against my head, right? Like, what are you doing on the tile floor in the entrance of the house, right? And then they bombed me with all these questions like, where's the car? Where's our child? What are you doing? And I couldn't answer one of these questions. I was so mangled, right? And just fear and terror like washed over me. Because I was like, how the hell am I going to get out of this? How am I going to explain this? I don't even know what's going on right now, let alone be able to come up with a lie to cover up my shit, right? And long story short, I got kicked out that evening. And I went to my brother's house. He took me in for the evening. And, like, I went over the story with him, right? I just told him the honest truth. And, like, I was like, in this moment, Mark, I am going to quit drinking and using drugs, because like I really don't care about my life so much, Mark. But if I'm now at the point where I'm risking my innocent 1.5-year-old daughter's life because of my drugs and alcohol, there's a fucking problem here, and I'm not okay with that, right? And I look at you straight across the table, Bill, like I meant it in that moment, right? That I was not going to drink or use again, right? And this is a wild story. This is where the first time I can like actually pinpoint the mental obsession, that peculiar mental twist happening in my life, is like I woke up the next morning, and against my brother's suggestions, I went to work. I told him I just need to keep busy. I need to do my thing, right? And I went to work. I was a cabinet maker at the time now, and we were on site. And for the first, I was starting work at 7. So from 6:30 till about 9:45, what's running through my head? Can't drink, can't use. Can't drink, can't use. Don't drink, don't use. Think about the consequences of what happened last night, right? But something at about 9:45 started to happen where I couldn't bring to enough force that same thought that I had been cycling through my brain since 6:30, right? It started to get washed over. I couldn't think of the consequences as strongly or effectively. And it was like, you know what? I think I should get in my car and go get a drink. Like the liquor store is going to open at 10. And I found myself thinking, this probably isn't a good idea, Chris. But I couldn't stop myself from getting in that car either, right? And I drove to the liquor store and I waited for it to open, and I got hammered again, right? And that was the peculiar mental twist that leaves me powerless against that drink. No matter what has just happened in my life, no matter what the consequences that I know have happened or will happen, no defense against that first drink, right? And I got wasted again. Right. And then that led to an intervention from my family a few days later, and I went to my first treatment center in 2014 in July. Right. They offered me a place to go out in Nanaimo. It's one of those ritzy, expensive ones, and I went. Right. I didn't want to go. I didn't want to stop drinking at that time. Right. But I had too much fear of letting my family down and the shitstorm it was going to cause if I didn't go. Right. So I agreed to go and have this experience and like check off the boxes, make my family happy. Right. Mm-hmm. And if you put me in a position of kind of like that, I'm going to play the role. right? You want me to tell you that I'm powerless over drugs and alcohol. You want me to tell you that I have a problem with drinking. You want me to turn my life over to this power that I don't understand. You want me to do all the things that you want me to do. I will play that role. I'm good at wearing the mask, right? So I did that, right? And that 60-day program turned to be a 128-day program because I was extra sick is what they told me, or the impression that I got. And, there's a couple things I learned in the book, right? That was the first time I'd been had the book impressed upon me, right? And it was a very intense program, much like the ones that you find here in Calgary, just a little bit more group therapy and a little bit longer days, right? But much the same thing. They take you up to step 5. They suggest that you get a sponsor, you go to meetings and all this stuff. You network and you build a life in recovery, right? And they were trying to teach me that. But I was still too deluded to see how sick I was, right? I really was. Looking back now, it's kind of baffling, right, that I couldn't see it. But I was just incapable of being honest enough to be able to see that, right? And I think there was a lot of fear, too, wrapped up in, like, if you're going to take the one thing away from me that does everything in my life for me, how am I going to – I can't fathom a way to live life through that, right? You take away my one and only crutch, my, like, love of my life, I'm going to wither and die, right? I can't do that. Right, I was not willing to step out on a limb like that, right, and grab for that flimsy reed that they talk about in the big book. Right, and anyway, so like the couple of things that I, really took home for me was the hard drinker. I was hoping against hope that I was the hard drinker, and I did not need this book. And the other thing was the book was to be suggestive only, and I took that as a literal, like, I can do what I want and still get the results. Right. And it's kind of funny. They gave me a little aftercare card that I found about 2 years ago. Right. So 2 years into recovery this time. And what is on that aftercard, the 10 steps, is exactly what I do today to stay sober. Like, it literally is exactly what I do today.
The 10th step?
No. It's just 10 little things
Okay.
that I should do every day. It's like, get up, make your bed, get up, pray to God, get up, do your readings, like all that kind of thing. All the suggestions that I do today was on that little card. And it was kind of like, a slap in the face when I found it. It was like, maybe if I had just done this then, I wouldn't have had to experience this pain. But the pain that I've now experienced from then till now has made me the man that I am today. So I don't regret it. Right. And anyway, back to 128 days of recovery at a treatment center or sobriety, because I wasn't really living in recovery. I lasted 7 days again before I picked up. And it was the same thing. I was sitting in my car cleaning it, and just that thought, I should get a drink, right? And again, I couldn't think about the time I just spent in treatment, couldn't think about how I was going to let my family down, couldn't think about the consequences with enough force. And I got in my car, drove to the liquor store, and there we go again. And that's when my drinking kind of went underground, because my wife found out immediately, right? She's a bloodhound for that kind of shit. And the next 4 years was just insanity.
So hold on. So you come out of treatment, within 7 days, you're drunk.
Yep.
You just spent 128 days in a program doing whatever the program people taught you to do. You've heard me say it maybe, or maybe somebody else say it, but, if God's a theory, you're in trouble. And was God very theoretical at that point still? You had a belief, and you had, you kind of maybe prayed and did whatever you needed to do to try to build the relationship, but the relationship was largely theoretical at that point?
I'm going to compare it to Fred's story, right?
Yeah.
Much like Fred when I was at this treatment center, because it says Fred would not accept that he was an alcoholic or admit that he was an alcoholic, and much less accept a spiritual remedy for his problem, right? And so when I compare myself to Fred, like, why would I accept spiritual help for a problem I don't think I fucking have, right? If I still think I've got some wiggle room and some power here, some control, why would I need a God? So when I went through the steps, it was just, doing the motions.
Great analogy.
Right?
Okay, carry on, bro.
Right? So
Next 4 years.
Next 4 years. So the drinking I tried to take underground, right? And then it turned back into cocaine use because my wife I could get away with it easier, right? And like the insanity again, at one point she took me to my aftercare place because I had relapsed, or she had caught me drinking a few times, and she's like, we need to do something about this, right? And so she got me put on a portable breathalyzer, which I carried with me 24 hours a day, right? Had to blow into this thing every 3 hours, 4 hours, 5 times a day, starting at like 7:30 in the morning, and the last time 10 or 10:30 at night. And you think this would be enough for a guy to like, you know, maybe think that he can't get away with drinking anymore, right? And you know, I experimented. I tried to figure out a way to like drink in between, or like the exact formula of how much I can take right after I blow to not get caught on the next blow, right? And it's comical. It's comical,
so
the things that I'm trying to do, right? Just yeah, and the lies just kept getting worse, and then it turned into, you know, manipulating money out of my wife and ours account, lies about where I've been, who I'm with, and it just went on and on and on. And like this like Kathleen, she's an amazing woman, and much like the book says, you know, we put them through hell, like literal hell, right? She stayed with me probably 3 years longer than she should have, right? Looking back. But it came to the point that she had had enough, right? And this is something that I had totally out of perspective, and she cleared up when I did my step 9 amends, because I remember the day that she kicked me out of the house is me coming home after work and being like, okay, I'm going to get honest with you today. And I just laid it all on the table, right? And when I finally had the chance to do the amends with her, we talked about this. And she's like, Chris, that is absolutely not how it fucking went. She's like, you came home from work wasted, and I called you out on it for like the billionth time, and you fought it for 3 hours, and I had to scream at you the whole time until you finally broke down and told me the truth, right? So like, it was just a good moment for me to understand that my perspectives are not always the truth, right? And it allowed me to examine other areas of my life and take, you know, outside help and perspective to actually uncover what is the truth, right? Because I'd absolutely fabricated the story that I came home and, you know, just gave up and was honest on my own part, but it wasn't true, right? Like, it was mind blowing. And you know, as much as I hated her and blamed her when she kicked me out of the house that day, Bill, it was the turning point I needed to send me to where I needed to go, to feel the pain I needed to feel that was required to hit here before I was willing to surrender to this program. Right? And so for the next 2 years, you know, I was homeless, and I went to treatment each summer during those 2 years. And like, it was the same thing. Like, I would ghost my kids, right? While I'm out there doing my thing. You know, I might answer the phone once in a while, but like, I wasn't in their life. They were like just non-existent for me because it was too much pain. I just had to like wipe them out of my memory, right? And then I would come into treatment, and I would like want them back in my life, and I would build that relationship to the best of my ability at the time for the next, you know, 4 to 6 months, right? And then I would fuck up again, and then I would ghost them again for another 9 months. So you can see the deterioration of the trust and like the belief that Dad's ever going to be any different, right?
And your wife, Kathleen? Catherine?
Yes.
Kathleen?
Yeah, Kathleen or Kat, yep.
So she ended up getting in a new relationship through this, and you're abandoning your kids off and on and coming around when you feel it's okay or when you need it. And did you see the damage you were causing to your kids?
Not at the time, no. Not to the impact that I do today. Did
Kat express any of the damage you were doing?
No, I think she realized that I was too sick, that anything that she was going to try to say to me was I was not going to be able to like actually hear. Right. So I blamed her for her taking away my kids. But the truth is, Bill, that she just put a stipulation that I need to be sober when I see them. And I was the one that was unable to do that. So,
and through these later years, you were doing crack cocaine too?
Yeah. Probably 6 months before I separated from her, I went from powder to the rock. And that's where I stayed until I came in 21.
And when you said you were homeless, like, were you street homeless or couch surfing homeless or?
Well, I had I had my house on wheels for the first year. So my little Toyota Corolla that I bombed around in. I stayed at the Mustard Seed once in a while, but a lot of the times I was just in my car, or I'd find a crack den, whatever that was. And then February of 2020, I can't even remember the years, man. 2020 maybe, I don't know. I crashed my car one night into a parked vehicle, attempting to go to my mom's house in a complete blackout driving. And thankfully, again, no one got hurt. Cops picked me up like moments after that. And like, I don't even know how I got a DUI. They watched me get out of the vehicle, like pour myself out of the vehicle holding a 2.6. Like, I don't know. It's just unexplainable.
You didn't get a DUI?
Didn't get a DUI. And that was the second kind of time that I had like that. There was another time I came out of 1835 and, I hadn't been effectively, or sincerely trying to work the program, right? I was just kind of going through the motions, much like I always did. And I was in the phase 3 part of it. And one morning I was just like, I can't handle this anymore. I got to have a drink. And I come out of the liquor store with the 2.6. An hour and a half later, I'm in an accident. 15 minutes after that, I'm at District 6, like trying to explain this with the person that I hit, talking to the police. And like one of the cops asked me, like, have you been drinking today? And I'm like, no, it was from last night. And like, I expected full well for that blower to come out. Never did. And I thought it was a win, Bill, because I walked out of that police station with my bag of drugs and alcohol and thinking, oh, my car's only impounded. I'll be able to pick that up in a couple of days, right? It was a win. And I left there, blacked out, woke up 3 hours later at Alpha House on the mats. And had no idea how I got there.
Right on, bro.
Right. So, like, I don't know.
You're the real deal, man.
100% I am. 100%. And it's baffling, like I said, how I couldn't see this before. The delusion was just too heavy, right? Too heavy.
There's this saying that I used to say about my own life, and until my ego and my spirit were both beaten to a pulp, that's when I became as open to and willing to listen. Like, my ego had to be beaten along with my spirit together to the point where I wanted to die. And then from that point, I could maybe accept something new as a solution. And that's what happened to me. Like, I had my business and all that stuff. And and I had my own beliefs about me and the lies that I would tell myself so I could live with myself. And honestly, bro, if I didn't have the experience I had, even if I had, like Jesse says, another $20 and a haircut, if I had another $20 and a haircut, bro, we might not be sitting here together right now, because I would never have admitted complete defeat. But there was that point where there was nothing left. There was like zero, right? Zero left in the tank. No spirit, no ego. And I admitted that. And where did that happen for you?
It was March 18th of 2021, right? And I had been on a run. I was working at the cedar shop at the time. And I had just been in treatment, the last summer at 1835. And much like it always goes, I start using a month or two after finishing the Step 5 program. And I'm just trying to manage my life, right? And I was running myself into the ground. And I don't know what it was. It was just the middle of the night. I was just done doing what I was doing, right? And much like you said, I had no more excuses and no more answers. I was just broken on all levels. And it's like that moment of clarity, I guess we can call it, where I could actually see my life for what it was. I could see the truth, right? And there was nothing to hide behind. It was and I got this feeling of Chris, if you don't take this window of opportunity to do something now, and we mean now, you're going to die. Right? And it's not months down the road. It was days or weeks is what my gut feeling was telling me, right? The people I was hanging around with, the copious amounts of drugs and alcohol, or the lifestyle, something was going to take me out, right? So I made a phone call, right? It was first a phone call to a friend who was in the program who I'd known before. I don't know why I specifically chose him, but he answered the phone, right? And then that led to me calling my mom, led to me to being in detox, led to, like, it was just a domino effect of how it all just played out, right? And I was still very much fighting the spiritual way of life while I was in detox because I didn't want to go back to treatment again. I was like, what more can they teach me? I've already been 3 times, right? Just so sick. But I was like, what else can I do? Like, if I believe what I want to do, if I continue thinking that I have a way out, is it going to be any different, Chris? Right? And like, much to my dismay, I ended up going to a treatment center for the 4th time. Right? And I got engaged with a sponsor right away. He kind of found me. He's my sponsor to this day. You know who he is. And, you know, it's funny, like he showed up for one of the meetings that that I was chairing at the house. And I think I was the last one to share. And he approached me afterwards and he's like, so how's your life going, Chris? And I'm like, bud, it's going fucking shitty. And he's like, yeah, it sounds like it. Right. And he told me a little bit about himself. And I was like, okay, man, like what's going on? He's like, well, do you want to go through the book? Right? Do you want to try these steps? And I was like, yeah, I do. Yeah, I do. And he's like, well, why don't you take my number down? And I was like, well, I don't know. Like this is happening all so fast. I don't know if I'd commit, whatever. I took his number down and I was like, I went up to my room and I'm like, do I call him or do I not call him? And then like, I just had that moment of like, God's offering me a hand here. The life preserve is there. What am I going to do? Am I going to, just push it away and wait for something else? And I ended up calling him that night. Right. And he expressed to me like, Chris, I understand that life's not going very well for you. And it's probably going to get a little bit worse before it gets any better. But I promise you, Chris, if you invest and commit into this program, follow the directions as it's laid out in the big book, life is going to change for you. And it's going to change for the better. Right. And he said, as long as you bring the willingness, because that's the one thing I cannot offer you, I will match it. Right. And like, I had no other options, Bill. I tried everything else. It was the last thing left on the table. Right. I didn't think it was going to work, but I had to give it that one chance. Much like my sponsor said, he's like, what do you have to lose, Chris? You either do this and it doesn't work, or you do this and it does work. Right. So like, what are you going to do with that? Right. So we started meeting week in and week out. And before I was done the 84-day program there, I was at step 12. Right. He was sending me out to find sponsees. Right. And I think for me, it was the step 5 portion that was like the TSN turning point where I could actually see and want a life in recovery. Right. Because when we got to step 3 and he asked me if I was convinced about pertinent idea A, B, and C. Well, I was convinced that I was an alcoholic. My life was unmanageable. 100%. Yeah. I could see that. I was convinced that no human aid could help me. Right. Because I'd tried everything. Right. And then he said, are you convinced that God will help you if you seek him? And I'm like, no, I don't know if I am.
Me too.
And he's like, well, you know what? Do you have hope that it could work for you? And I was like, yeah, I have hope it can work for me. Like it has to work. So I have to have hope. And he's like, okay, we'll start there. Right. And so then we went on. And when I got to step 5, like those step 5 promises talk about, feel like, I can't say it verbatim, but I mean, you feel much better leaving that room. I'll tell you what I did.
Feeling the nearness of our Creator.
Yeah, I felt the nearness of our Creator, but I felt like a bag of shit when I came out of that room.
Yeah.
Right? And why is that? Because I'll say his name, Regan. He pointed out all the things I didn't want to see or couldn't fucking see in my world.
Properly humbled.
Yeah, he exposed everything that I was rationalizing and making excuses for. And, he painted a picture of who I'd become in addiction. Mm-hmm. Right? But he stopped me and he said, like, Chris, that's not who you are today sitting across the table for me now. And it's the guy that you never have to be again. Right? But if you don't continue with this way of life and connecting with a higher power, you will default back to that setting. 100% guaranteed. Right? And that was where I was like, okay, I don't ever want to be this guy that causes so much pain in so many people's life. I am going to work my absolute ass off to not be that person again. right? And that was where like the flame of willingness was sparked even further. And I just stepped on the gas of recovery and I have never turned back, right? I listened to everything, every suggestion that he had, anyone else had. I said yes to everything, right? And it's brought me where I am today.
And life's pretty fucking good today.
Life, yes, it is, right? I can tell you some things that I don't like about life today, but you know, when I compare it to what life was like then, it's an absolute fucking dream, right? So I just want to talk about a couple of things here. Like, so there was an incident, you know, when shortly after I had been kicked out of my house, right? Kathleen, a couple of weeks later, she's like, I want to file for divorce. And I think it's good that we tell the kids face to face. And like at that time, my daughter, I think, was probably 7 or 8. And my other guys were, you know, 4 and 1.5. Right. And she's like, well, why don't you come over and we'll just sit down and we'll talk with them. Right. And holy man, that was like one of the toughest things I ever had to do. And we just explained to them, like, Mom and Dad, we can't be together anymore. And, you know, when that statement hit my daughter, like I watched her face just melt, right? Because she understood and she was just so sad and it broke my heart, right? It absolutely destroyed me, right? And once that little meeting was done, letting them know I left the house and like I had no other recourse but to go and get high again because I had to blot that out of my memory. Right? It was just one of the worst things I've ever felt, right? And you think things like that in a man's life, you know, would be enough to straighten him out, but it's not so with the alcoholic, right? Not in my experience, at least, right? And then, so when I got the opportunity to do the Step 9 Amends with my daughter, my sponsor, Regan, gave me the green light at about a year, 13 months or so. And I sat her down and we just had a discussion, right? She allowed me the time to like kind of go through how I felt I had harmed her, which I did. And then I gave her the opportunity, as suggested, to allow her time to share with me how I really had harmed her, right? And so she did that to the best of her ability, right? I think she held back a little bit, right? Because she was only 10 at the time. Right. I think this is going to be an ongoing thing as I progress in life and in recovery and she gets a little bit older, we can have more in-depth conversations. But for a 10-year-old to stop me and go, she looks me in the eye and she goes, Dad, I know that people do drugs and alcohol because bad things are happening in their life. She goes, Dad, what was bad in your life? Holy fuck, dude. Meltdown. I had no idea that this child could come up with a question like that. And she caught me so off guard. I had no idea how to respond at first. Right? Internally, I was just like dying. Right? I was like, how could I have done this to my child? Right? But quickly, I went to God in my head and I was like, I was sick. It's, I have to take responsibility, but I was sick. Right? And I just explained to her, like, in the best way that I could, I said, nothing bad was in my life. I'm just a sick person who, when he's drinking and using drugs and alcohol, he can't stop himself from drinking and using alcohol, right? Because I think her thought was like, was it us that was bad in your life, right? And I hope that, in the future, we can have more further in-depth discussions and talks about that as she gets older to kind of clear that. But like, wow, that was such an impactful question from her at that age.
Yeah, dude. I waited like 5 years to do my amends, 4 or 5 years to my kids. And my first amend was to my youngest daughter, Jillian. And she was, I think, 6 or something when I started smoking crack. Maybe 5. And then they didn't know. Like 6, 7 years later, they're homeless. And then I'm like gone. And then they're living with the nanny who used to work for us in my nanny's crawl space. My whole family's living in this crawl space, like lower level living room at the back and then crawl space underneath at the back of a single family home. And I'm living in a trailer that I borrowed from my ex-wife. And but anyway, down the road a little ways, I'm making my amends, and I figure like I pretty much know how I harmed her and what I did, and I'm like, I'm really sorry that I wasn't around for like that first year of my recovery, and I kind of abandoned you kids, and like I was really sick and I needed to get better. And the second year, I was around a little more, and I probably wasn't as bad. And third year I was kind of there, but like I told you earlier, that I was always talking about God and fucking program and push them away, and they were all reeling from what had happened, and I'm spending time getting well. Anyway, so this amends at around 5 years. After I'm done, I did what you did, and I said, how did I harm you in your eyes? And she's like, Dad, you weren't just not around for the first and second year of recovery. You weren't around for 6 or 7 years of me being a little kid. You weren't even there. You weren't present. You were always gone. I don't barely remember you. And like you, dude, I didn't know what to say because I wasn't there. I might have been jumping on the trampoline with them, but I was fucking high. I was in the garage making it look like I was working, just getting stoned. And I wasn't home. I would not come home. And so I wasn't present for my kids, even though I was there for those 6 or 7 years. And like Jillian was 5 or 6 and Lucy was like 8. Lila was a little older, so she didn't get affected as much by it. But that shit really affected them and my whole family. And Shannon didn't even know I was smoking crack till I made my second amend at 18 months or 2 years.
Wow.
I hid it all. And so like that dishonesty and the deceit and and then Lila, my oldest kid, she came to my house for the amend, and it was like 5 or 6 years after I'd gotten sober, and I had made my amend. She's like, can I ask you a couple questions? And I'm like, yeah. She's like, remember the night that you left our family home? Me and you got in our first and ever fight? And I like, yeah. And you left and never came home? I said, yeah. She's like, did you never come home because of our fight?
Oh my God.
And I was like, holy shit. She's been carrying that for this whole time. And I was like, no. And then I had to explain it to her. But how do you explain it, right? And then I was asking her, she asked me, why did you smoke crack? Why did you do drugs? Why did you do that to the point where it destroyed? Fuck, again, I didn't know what to say. I don't know. I'm fucking still don't really know. I just know I'm powerless, and I suffered a spiritual sickness that only a drug and alcohol worked for however long it works, and then it doesn't work, and then you want to die, and then you find this way of life, and then you spend the rest of your life making reparation. And I've made, a few amends with my ex-wife. She still's finding things out that I thought I'd talk to her about on my podcast sometimes.
Oh.
Yeah, yeah, dude. So it's a never-ending journey, I think, of like living amends to my family and to the world at large. And then I'm very busy in recovery, so sometimes my family takes a backseat on getting my time. But I think overall, everything's working itself out. But I, like my mom, like she wants more time, and she's getting older, and my dad, and so I gotta ask Creator for like balance and like, but it's not easy, man. Like making amends to our kids and to our ex-wives. But I think a lot of it, I'm just going to finish with this and I'll let you kind of carry on. People ask me about like what this really is. And I'm like, you know what? God gave me my free will. Just like he gave you free will, he gives everyone free will. And we can all do whatever we want with it in our lives. I said, I didn't do very good with my free will. The gift that God gave to me of free will, I didn't do very good. I didn't have a manual to live life, and I lived it not that good. And I said, but in the second life that I got gifted from God, my gift back to God is to live my life the best way that I can and try to serve him and his kids the best way. And that's not just my family, that's all of his kids. But I do have to pay some special attention to my family too. But they're all coming along. They are. And, you know, we love each other. And me and my ex-wife are really growing right now, actually. And my kids, and fuck, we run into troubles. About 6 months ago, my youngest daughter said, I think I'm going to disown you as my dad and shut you out of my life for a bit. And we had a good chat. But also in the same breath, bro, like I had to learn that I can't let their guilting me and shaming me, fucking me acting in self to always try to fix everything from what I did. And there became a point where I'm like, no, man, I'm not letting that happen from you to me anymore. Don't guilt me. Don't shame me. Let's have vulnerable conversations. And I promise I'll do my best to meet you at the point. I can't promise anything, but I'll try my best to do everything I can, the best that I can. And I'm human. I'm going to fuck shit up. So know that. So yeah, your whole story, bro, just resonates so deeply with me. And I had a cancellation today, and I asked my one daughter, think I could get you and your sister and your mom here to do, you know, we'll do a podcast together. It'll probably be crazy tears and shit. But
Right.
so today, like, and did you make amends to your other kids and your wife or Dave?
I haven't made amends to Nixon and Asher, just mostly because of the age at this moment. Like, I've explained that I'm a sick person, but at some point that will happen. I have done the amends with Kathleen. I got the green light at 13 months as well. Same with Dave. Right. And so for Dave, you know, I did him before Kathleen, actually, and we sat down and, you know, like, thank God he gave me the opportunity, you know, to just sit and, you know, tell him how I feel that I've hurt him. Right. And like also express how much he means to not just me, but like to my children and to my ex-wife. Right. Like, I had such a skewed view of this guy. Okay, I'm going to bring this back. Okay, so when I was in 1835, shortly after I got separated from my wife at the time, right? I was on a weekend pass or something. I had two other guys from the house in my vehicle, and we were driving. I was dropping each of them off at their respective places, and I was going to visit my dad, who was at my aunt's place, because at that time I had a parenting order and I couldn't see my kids on my own, and they were there. Okay, and as we're passing by, as we were driving down the road on Elbow, who do I see walking hand in hand? Kathleen and this guy Dave. And this is probably like 2 months after we separated, right? And like, thank God that there was two other, like, you know, sober guys in the vehicle, because my first thought was run them over now. Right. But I had this panic set in and I didn't know what to do. And the guy's like, you just need to pull over, dude. And we had a discussion. And anyway, made it through that. Right. Like, that was the hatred I had for both of them at the time. It was misconstrued and not warranted, but it was how I felt at the time. Right. And when we sat down, you know, especially after like being exposed in the step 5, like, you know, when we separated the true from the false, I could now see that Dave had done things for my kids that I was unable to do when I was so sick, right? He stepped up when I couldn't, right? And this man has so much love for not only his children, for, you know, his now wife, but he loves my children like they're his own, right? He embraces them. He cares for them. He takes them on fishing trips. He like teaches them fatherly stuff. Like, this man is a gem. Right? He's a diamond in the rough. And I'm so happy that my ex-wife has found him and that they've made the union of marriage, and they're going to try to, you know, make the best of this world with 6 fucking kids. Like, God bless them for that. Right. But sitting down with him and just having like a frank conversation about like, thank you for all the support you've given me. And like, you know, I'm sorry for all the harms that I've done to you. There was never any face-to-face that we had while I was in addiction. It was more like the harms that I was doing to Kathleen that he had to witness or hear about. right? And he's like, he was so understanding, and he's such a gentle person and just such a big heart. You know, it was great to like clear the air and start a friendship, like a real father to father friendship, right? It was amazing, like magical, right? I don't know how to explain it. And then, so with the ex-wife, when I got the opportunity to do that, you know, the golden part of that was having her tell me how I had harmed her. My harms didn't compare, not even close. It was like night and day. What I thought I had done to her to what she truly was holding on to. Like, she still has trust issues with her partner today because of me. And when I heard that, man, I didn't know what to say. It broke me, right? She'd given up on herself. She let herself go. Like, she didn't think she was worth, you know, a penny, right? Because of what I had done and how I'd, you know, just abandoned her, right? The lady that I said that I was, you know, going to be there through sickness and health, right? And she went on with a couple of other things that I'm not going to bring up, but like, you know, to know that I had the capacity to hurt someone in that way was unreal, right? And I walked away from that being like, holy cow, like, I really need to stick to this program. I need to stick with God, because like, I can't repeat this stuff, right? Like, feeling that and hearing that just broke me, right? But it gives me, again, the willingness to move forward and like character build and like become a better person with God's help, right? And like through that, there's been some family healing, right? But it's all been on God's time, right? I can't demand it. I can't ask for it sooner than He's ready to give it, or than they're ready to, you know, to allow themselves to feel that pain and heal through it and grow through it, right? So it's all come on God's time. And for me, it seems like it's come very quick, right? The place that we're at today, like it's nothing short of a miracle. I can't express that enough, right? Like, for them to offer for me to come and spend time in their home. And, you know, like for the first 5 days that I was there after we had celebrated Christmas, Kathleen and Dave took his 3 girls, and went to another home to stay so I could be with my children.
No way.
And then came back during the day to like take us up the coast of the beach and do the adventures throughout the day, feed us dinner, and then go back over to this other house. Like, man, it makes me want to tear up, like just understanding the work that God has done in my life. Right? Like, sure, I brought the shovel and I've done my portion, but God has provided these miracles, because I know I can't do that stuff on my own. Right. And, you know, that's my intention, is to move to Brisbane, to be closer to my kids, right? Like, the time that I've had away from my kids, like allowing them to go to Brisbane, it's allowed me to focus on what God's got my purpose here for, right? I'm committed to my school, right? I work with guys in the program, right? Try to, you know, give them the direction that was given to me. And, you know, not a lot of people have made it to that step 12, but like, I'm staying sober. So it's working for me. Right? That's what my sponsor continues to like point me to. He's like, Chris, it doesn't matter. You're not the one that determines whether these guys receive the message. You show up, you do the work with them. That's all that God asks for you. Right? And so that's what I do. Right? I've fallen in love. Oh man, Bill, I didn't come into recovery to fucking help people.
No.
It was all about me. Right? Like, how can I help me? How can I get what I need? But somewhere along the way, I've fallen in with service, fallen in love with service. I have a passion for it. My biggest, I guess, passion is for H&I within CA, right? Just being on the front lines, being at detoxes, being at treatment centers, returning to my last treatment center, and just being there for the newcomer, right? And just trying to live a way of life that looks appealing to maybe someone that's had enough of the old way of life, and maybe they'll be attracted to it, and being able to offer anything that I can in that way, right? And then that's what brought me into nursing. Like, nursing was never something that was on my radar, but I wanted to be able to like broaden my ability to be of service to God and those about me. And somehow that just kind of came into my mind. And, you know, with the help of my therapist at the time, like, she baby stepped me into upgrading, because I basically had to redo my high school again. And then, you know, I'm 2 months away from graduating this program, and then I'll get licensed. And during this time, I'm going to start filling out the appropriate paperwork to try to get a work visa and a living visa for moving to Brisbane. Yeah.
You know, like you didn't come in here to do service and help others. You came in here to save your own ass and maybe get well, right? And you know, in our literature, there's a spot in the doctor's opinion where it talks about some form of moral psychology was of urgent importance. So one of our friends, Lee, his wife, has been in school for addictions and counseling, going to university, and she told me this. She said the term moral psychology was in my books. And she said, you know what the definition was of it? I said, no, what? She said, ego versus altruism, moving from ego to altruism. And that's really what we do here. And through the self-sacrifice, we get to the unselfish constructive action. Working the program, I'm going to say specifically step 10 and 11, 12 becomes a natural part because that's how we're designed by Creator. We're designed to serve and to love, but we're conditioned to serve ourselves. And because we serve ourselves, we get sick. But then we unserve ourselves, we serve others, but it comes through a lot of self-sacrifice, right? And we're going from ego to altruism. And the real definition of altruism is unselfishly devoting oneself to the welfare, happiness, and well-being of others. My definition of ego is ego, edging God out. And if God is love, it's not love, it's fear. So it's like removing fear. And it's any thought or action. Any thought or action is ego. And my definition is a little different than the mainstream, but based on what I know about alcoholics and addicts and my own spiritual journey, that's the deal, man. Going from fear-based living to love-based living, and going from trying to make life produce what I think I should have, much of it indoctrinated through systems, to, you know, I don't know what's best for me. Let me serve you. And then these magical things happen. Like you'll be living somewhere you never expected. You'll be a fucking nurse that you never expected, and having a passion for serving others, which you never expected. And the beautiful thing about this way of life is you wake up every morning, you don't really know what's going to happen. And then we don't know where we're going to really be. And you can't connect the dots of your life too much in the moment or ahead. We can have the goals, but we got to let it play out how it plays out. But you can always connect the dots looking backwards. This had to happen like this. That had to happen like this. In order for me to grow and be the man I am today, I had to lose it all.
Yeah.
I had to lose my family and everything. And, you know, yes, there was a lot of pain there. But in the same breath, I look at it like, well, I don't know what's best for anybody, including my family. And even though they may think that was terrible, which I do too, nothing in my life has been put in my life to make my life more terrible. It's actually been put in my life to make it better. I just got to learn the lesson and accept it. And a lot of it's painful. But on the other end of that pain is that touchstone to all spiritual progress. And that's kind of how it goes, right?
Right. Someone told me the other day that I need to get comfortable with being uncomfortable, right? Because that's where the most growth happens, right? And if I can see that if I can have that attitude and that perspective coming into like any type of test, any kind of pain, any kind of challenge, struggle that I'm facing in my life, no matter what the degree of it may be, if I can have that attitude of like, this is for a reason, right? The reason is that I get a chance to witness God shine in my life when I turn to Him and do the next right thing.
Things are only seemingly good or seemingly bad.
Yeah.
We don't know if they're good or bad. Some of the worst things ever have been the best things to come out of it. For you too, as I've heard your story today. So anyway, now we're going to shut her down. I'm sure I forgot to set the timer again. And the last podcast I did, I forgot to set the timer. And yeah. But I'm sure we're well over my allotted time. And like I said, there's no time. And in our culture, people talk about Indian time. Oh, you're on Indian time. You're always running late. No, what Indian time really means is things take as long as it takes. Healing takes what it takes. And sometimes ceremony takes what it takes. And in my opinion, things like this they're ceremonial.
Right.
So I just really want to thank you for coming. And before you leave, I would like you to share a message for anyone that you want, whether it's a father or someone struggling in recovery, or, you know, wives of the husbands, or, you pick who you want to share a message for, and just like say, give them some hope, give them some of your God dope.
All right. I don't give advice. I can just share my experience and kind of what, motivated me to continue going along this path. And I guess if I'm speaking to like anyone that knows an alcoholic, right, and is dealing with the sufferings and the pain that comes along with that family illness, is like, please never give up. Please never give up. Right? Because if my family had given up on me, I don't know if I'd be here today. I really don't, right? It's through their strength and their support and their love, no matter what was going on in my life. Like, yes, they had to put up boundaries at certain points that I forced them into. But like when I was ready to be for real and, commit to a different way of life, they slowly started coming around, right? And, for the alcoholic or addict who's, maybe still struggling inside or outside of the rooms, lean into God. Like, that's the only thing that I can say. Like, that's the main purpose of the book, is to connect us with a higher power of our own understanding. But for me to be able to connect, I have to do the work. And it's not just going through the steps the first time. It's continuing with the 10 and 11. And like, I've just come to experience that last year, I wasn't doing 10 and 11, and I was living the same old life. I was falling right back into that default setting. And like, for me, an addict, like, of the hopeless variety, I can only live that way for so long before the only other solution I know of becomes a real possibility in my life. And for me, that leads to death, right? Normal people can deal with stuff that, their everyday living without the possibility of dying. But for a drug addict of my caliber, that hopeless variety that the big book talks about, like, I need to deal with this shit constantly, right? I need to self-reflect, and I need to take that to God and other people so I can get a different perspective and grow through these uncomfortable times. Because if I'm not growing, there's no stagnation in recovery, is what I've found, right? I'm either going back to default setting, which is a crack-smoking, selfish drug addict, or I'm moving towards God and whatever that plan looks like for him. Right. So God bless. I thank you for this opportunity.
Yeah, bro. Thank you so much. And thank you all for watching, and we'll see you in the next one. Peace out.
Thank you.